All right, Louis, go ahead.
Do we have any other agenda items? Keith, you mentioned the CNI thing. I think it's worthwhile discussing it.
Agreed. The other thing is probably the release. There is a blocker for some a GitHub pat that we are talking about. Oh, okay. John's got an update. Thanks.
No, it's not about that. It's about the first one, not about the.
Okay.
Never mind. Okay.
Okay. Well, then, John, take it away. Sorry.
Let's do the second one first because it's probably easier.
Okay, that's fine.
But I don't know what we have to discuss really. It's really just that we need someone from Google to help us, and they are not here, and they are also not helping. So, Costin's here.
Hello.
Perfect. Just the person we need. Yeah, Costin, what we were saying was one of our tokens expired, and it's generated from some of the GitHub bot accounts. And the way we have the bot accounts set up is that only it's stored in Google Valentine internal system. So we don't have access to it, basically. We have migrated to a open 1Password account that all the TOC members have access to. Right, that's complete, Keith. So the request is basically if you can exfiltrate the passwords to us. I think you have access to both probably, and so you can do it in a secure way directly from Valentine to 1Password potentially. I'm like 90% sure you have access. I know for sure that Justin and Sergey do if you don't.
Okay, I'll send me what you have. I'll try it. If not, I'll get Sergey. If not, Justin, and if not, I'll hack it in and see what I can do.
Okay, yeah, I'll send you all the info. Keith, I actually don't know how to access 1Password. Can you send us that info on the TOC Slack channel, maybe?
What is 1Password? Is it another hosted service?
It's just a password management service, but it's hosted by the CNCF, so everyone here can access it. Versus the Google internal one that obviously we can't access. So
interesting. So it's not LastPassword; it's 1Password.
Yeah, they have. Yeah, both of those exist. So.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. I knew 1Password. It's standalone. I mean, you have your own files encrypted, and but anyway, that's good to know. I'll check it.
Costin, ping me which email you want because I think the invitation I sent expired. So let me know what email you want to be invited to the 1Password, and we'll make sure you get access. So you can
question at google.com or gmail.com. Both of them work.
Okay.
Probably I missed it. Sorry.
Very good. Okay, you should have an invite now in your inbox. We will follow up async. Appreciate it.
Okay, well, that's straightforward enough. Okay, CNI.
Yeah, so basically, I think Jackie talked about this in the last COC meeting, but wanting to figure out, originally when we first talked about this, we actually had a thread on how you wanted to handle this. It's certainly public, so we're not breaking embargo by talking about it here. But how do you want to move forward with letting folks know about the race condition that exists when nodes get rebooted? We probably should say something so people don't get surprised. But it is very niche, and there's at least one mitigation shipping in 1.27. So I think this is the right time to make an announcement about it because there is a mitigation that is shipping. There's actually an open PR that needs to be merged actually for that. But wanted to get other folks, other TOC members' perspective on one, the severity and priority of the issue, as well as how do you want to communicate it out. Do you want the security advisory in 127? What's our plan here?
Well, can we talk about the issue just a little bit? Because that should be obviously dipping in a bit. I read through the issue. Presumably the same problem exists in the layered CNI solutions, right? The overlay CNIs.
Yes, every chained CNI that cannot somehow tell the primary CNI to not overwrite it would in theory have the same issue, unless you have something like Sidecar Istio does, where you can then inject an init container to stop pod startup.
Yeah, so then, like, just on the messaging front, presumably all the overlay capable CNI vendors must be messaging about this.
Depends. So for the cloud providers, at least, like the cloud providers control the nodes. So
yeah, the cloud providers can do what they want, right? I mean, the CNI vendors, right? Like, so that's Cilium and Calico, right? Basically.
Yeah, like in my experience with Cilium, this is based on memory from looking a while ago, so we could double check. They have info about the startup issue around painting. They don't have any info about the restart problem. Costin says sidecars are affected. No, sidecars aren't affected actually because we have the init container thing. And so it's impossible for the pod to start without IP tables rules, basically.
Okay, just wanted to confirm.
Yeah, that's a potential fix for this as well, as we can allow an init container. It's a terrible solution for other ways, but it is a robust solution at least.
Probably the most robust solution, honestly.
One more question with the new, sidecar container or whatever in Kubernetes. That's also fine, and it's probably more reliable because I know it's now moved to GA and it's definitely the cleanest solution. And
I don't think it has a practical. Sorry to answer Costin's last question. No. I don't think that the API has any practical changes there when it comes to the robustness of Istio sidecar mode. Regardless, we have a dedicated init container that does not proceed until IP tables are there.
I guess, Costin, are you suggesting that the sidecar API is the way to achieve the init container effect?
No. I mean, with the new mode where you can have the sidecar container also do init, we can simplify quite a bit, and it may be a mode that we will support long term, and it's always safe. I mean, it's reliable, it's deterministic. It doesn't depend on whatever CNI vendors do. It may be worth reevaluating. I mean, I know some people believe that we should get rid of the sidecar or should only have, but there is some value probably.
Can I get clarification on where are we putting the sidecar? Is it on the Istio CNI? Or is it on the application pod?
The application.
Well, that defeats all the purpose of ambient, though.
Well, no. So what we're saying is we need an init container, and the only thing it would do is check if the IP tables were present, and if not present, cause the pod to fail.
Don't run
block. Or just block.
Yeah, basically block.
But does that mean as the user add their pods to ambient, they would now need to restart their pods to pick up that init container?
Sure, but that's not a huge problem.
But
it's strictly better than sidecars. It's strictly better than the existing sidecar approach because assuming that init container doesn't change, I don't see any reason why it would change except to switch to NF tables or something. You're doing it once and then you're not having to change it every upgrade. It's just there.
Yeah, got it. But still painful, yeah.
Well, the biggest problem with sidecar today is envoy, obviously, that you run one envoy pair. But having a small init container that sets up IP table and makes sure everything is good, and perhaps runs cTunnel as well as an option if someone wants to, would be a good option because you would have ambient, all the feature, everything that ambient has, with a tiny price that cTunnel will run for each pod, which is a very tiny binary and very small overhead. And again, it would avoid future problems because CNIs will keep breaking. We are relying on some hacks at the per node layer. I don't know. That's my opinion. I don't think the problem was ever that you having multiple sidecars, or the problem was that we had the huge envoy running L7 on each pod.
To be clear, the init container proposing would not be injecting a proxy. It would be basically like an IP tables check.
What we have today, but again, we have flexibility. If we have a sidecar, there is no reason. I mean, if we agree to have a sidecar in some modes, whatever it is,
it's not a sidecar. So the restart policy would not be all. What is the sidecar container restart policy? It would not be a native sidecar.
That's a choice. That's a choice. I mean, we because again, a nice thing about especially with NFT and what we discussed in the previous meeting is that We could do dynamic changes to IP tables, and we could do local. By the way, that's another option to do dynamic changes instead of doing static changes with NFT. So we kind of got stuck with a mode where at startup we do something and then we goodbye. But it doesn't have to be that way. You can keep monitoring. You can change dynamically. You can adjust stuff without restarting. Anyway, long-term discussion.
So just reading through the issue again, and correct me if I'm wrong, but restarting, it seemed like restarting Istio CNI on the node or restarting ztunnel on the node corrected the issue. Which of those two, it wasn't clear actually in the thread, which of those two actually corrected the issue?
So there's been a lot of slightly similar issues all getting lumped together, but the main ones is basically, the underlying problem is that on the node we stick a file that says you need to use this when you start up pods, and then also Istio is watching pod updates and correcting things, and also at startup correcting things. And so if you restart CNI, it will go re-resolve everything. So what we have solutions for is one, like a more periodic, like making sure that we don't end up in a permanent bad state. There had been some specific issues where the pod is in a bad state and we never notice and fix it even when everything's back up. That's not too bad to fix. The thing that's harder to fix is the state of like a new node, or even worse, a restart. How do we make sure that a pod is never in a bad state? Where a bad state means that there's no rules or no missing IP tables rules. And that's just due to limitations in Kubernetes letting us inject ourselves as the required thing for a pod to start.
Do we eventually start?
Yeah, so let's assume we have all the fixes that we know about applied, except for one that we don't necessarily think is 100% reliable. What would happen is the node restarts, your pod starts up first, it starts running with no IP tables, and then a minute later, CNI comes up, it detects this, fixes it, and it's all good, but you had a minute where your traffic was either broken or bypassing policies. Or
Yeah, that's the thing I'm worried about, and I'm also wondering if that's the status quo for every other CNI vendor.
I would guess, based on my understanding, and to be clear, that's only when they're like a layered CNI. If they are the primary CNI, it's not a problem.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And John, was that scenario including the own CNI config or not including the own CNI config?
That was not including it, just because we know that solution is not 100% reliable on some platforms. So,
got it. And for context there, for the people who might not be following along, the own CNI config is the mitigation I was talking about for 1.27. It's not 100%, and we know that it doesn't work with EKS and BottleRocket, for example, due to the way they handle their file system. But it is something that users can do in their installation if they are particularly security conscious in 1.27. So there is a mitigation. Remains to be seen what we want to do for 128.
Okay, so we do need to know what market status quo is.
I mean, so to that question, Louis, I mean, I think Multis is probably the primary layer, but they create separate networks, so it's not quite the same. I'm trying to think what.
And there's a fair number of people who use like the Cilium over the top of EKS, VPC.
Yeah, Cloud IPAM sort of thing. All
right, so there's some research to be done to see how well documented this is in the other CNIs, and what mitigations they're using or recommending.
Is it correct right now, before any fix in Istio 126 today, if they hit this situation, they won't be able to recover from it?
Not without restarts, correct. In pre-126, we did not backport the own CNI fix.
So,
right, so
after restart,
oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to ask. So after restart, they have a chance to recover, but it's not 100% guaranteed, right? They could hit the same issue again. Is that?
No, they can. And John, Stephanie, correct me if I'm wrong, but they can recover. The issue is not quite the recovery. That's not difficult. The issue is, from a security perspective, you've got a window of time where potentially you have traffic that completely bypassed your policies.
Okay, so I thought the issue is both, but now the issue is they will recover. It's just the window of the time before the IP table is effective, then the rules are not enforced.
Yeah, they can recover eventually, assuming that the CNI comes online after the primary CNI does, and that because if the CNI comes back online and the pod is restarted, I think that might be the other part. The pod might need to be restarted. I've looked at the details of the CNI enough to know for sure, but I think you might also need to restart the pod to mitigate the issue.
Right. So Lynn, to answer your question, there is no automated guarantee of recovery.
Yeah.
Yes,
because you could hit the same ordering and issue and then.
So it is manually recoverable. It is not currently guaranteed to be automatically recovered. Right, and we should consider that second part. Right, like can we have a controller that's watching for this state? Or like what are the automatic recovery options, I guess?
Yeah.
So we have the problem, like, which is like the period where like there's just nothing we can do because it hasn't come up yet and the pods have started communicating. And then there's what can we do to minimize the length of time that state stays active for?
We could do something similar to the repair controller. So yeah, for as far as automatic remediation, we could do something similar to the repair controller where the CNI NS enters the pods, does an IP tables check. When it finds one and it finds a missing one, it adds it. That's fairly expensive. And I think Jackie looked at that. It's just because you have to sort of do that in a loop. Because looking at the API server information, there's no way of knowing if pods are missed or not. Because on a node restart, the annotation for being enabled is still there. So you have to go through every pod in your node periodically. And you also don't get an API server event if a node is restarted either. Unless the cloud provider adds a taint or something, and this you would have to be aware of all the different permutations of it. So it's very tricky to detect the bug to begin with, to detect the failed state. So it's expensive because you have to reconcile every pod every so often. And each reconciliation step requires an NS enter.
Would it be possible when the CNI pod goes down, we just, I guess not everybody using the taint. I was thinking when the CNI goes down, we mark the node as not available. And then when the CNI comes up, when it's healthy again, we mark the node as taint as available to serve workload. But that's only if people using taint.
Yeah.
I also don't think that the node shutdown process is not like a pod kill process. I don't think you get a sig int, then a sig term. I actually think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's undefined.
Yeah,
so
I
there's
mean,
no
it depends. Like, there's
graceful
different processes. Like, there's graceful ones. Obviously, someone can just unplug the machine and then plug it back in, right?
Yeah.
You'll get some indication at some point, probably in the status, but whether it's reliable or not is unclear.
Okay.
So just coming back to your kind of detection key, right? That's a kind of positive detection strategy, right? The other option is we have a negative detection strategy, which is ztunnel, like the CNI must mark to the API server a pod to say that it has properly enrolled it. And the absence of that labeling indicates that it has not.
Labeling can't work because when the node reboots, you still have all the same labels and annotation that you did before.
Right. So that's the same thing as what I was mentioning about the taint the node. You don't know when it would happen if there's a power outage.
The node label should have changed though, right? The node startup time is a label. You'd have to track both states.
Yeah, I'm pretty confident that if the node reboots, at some point the node's going to change. Now, whether that changes when it comes back up or when it's shut down is a different story. And obviously, if you notice when it comes up, there's still a race condition.
Right.
Like we had always said for the node taint, like you can go configure in your cloud specific provider, you start the node with this taint and then it's perfect. ignoring the restarts. But we'd also consider it a mode where Istio just watches nodes and adds a taint as soon as possible, which, like, practically speaking, who's going to win, us or someone scheduling a pod and then the pod running? Probably us, but it's not guaranteed, right? So same story there. Like, this whole problem is just like plugging holes, but not solving the underlying root cause, which unfortunately is so far impossible. NRI does not solve it either, but every single person that is working on it in Kubernetes is aware of the issue. I don't know if they care to fix it, but they've all commented on the issue I made that we should solve this. So
there is a new working group that just started up, which I think is probably the right place to think about some of these things and the life cycle stuff. But I don't think this is the top item on their list. There's a long doc. And, yeah.
Do we think such a negative marking scheme is possible to write a controller? So, like, what do we think the heuristic would be?
Honestly, you probably don't even necessarily need to look at the node. You might want to, but like, we can just look if there's a CNI running on the node, right? And if the node goes away, there's probably the CNI pod becomes unhealthy or something. It may be like, if we go look at the two states, we end up seeing that the node status ends up being more useful, but I'm not sure that's inherently so. I mean, we'd probably just have to go look at states, watch pods, watch nodes, restart the node and see what happens, and then figure out what to do, right?
What's doing the watching in that scenario, John? Is it the SGD, CNI?
I would assume SGD. There's really two choices for who can paint. You could do it at the provider level, which is good, but not portable and doesn't fix restarts. You can do it in Istio, which is universal, but not 100% reliable. And you can do it in mutation webhook, but you can't do it in a webhook for reliability reasons. But you could do it in cell, but cell's alpha. And
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
We looked at Calico and Cilium to, I mean, if they're willing to include some hypertable modification in their product, basically to have it, to avoid chaining and to have kind of the CNI plugin be responsible for setting IP tables, redirect. Bitfire universal is not Istio specific in most ways.
So that's the other part of this, is that Ben, when he was working on this, changed the CNI spec to be able to have like a folder of sort of chain CNI plugins, which is better than the fighting that we have today.
I was not talking about chaining. I was talking about the CNI providers as a common feature to have ability to set IP table redirects and to move the entire, because it's not Istio specific what we are doing. It's a very common problem to set some IP tables in each node, to have a folder where you set NF tables, for example, since it's a new hot stuff that can be customized by the user or by putting some files in a directory, or or even to have more of the advanced features that we are doing with moving sockets into folders. John?
Yeah, a few comments here. So I think the thing Ben did, it makes things slightly nicer, but it doesn't really solve the fundamental issue, which is that the configuration to say we are required to operate is a file on the node, and we can't put a file on the node until we can run there, which is inherently racy, unless we're like controlling the node OS image or something, which is the least portable solution. For Costin's point, though, I agree. We could have the CNI do it potentially. That's actually something that GK sort of does, where the real thing is that the primary CNI doesn't have this problem because they get to control a status on the node that says it can be scheduled. And so if you have that primary CNI, it doesn't even necessarily need to do anything. It just needs to wait until Istio is ready. Then you can solve the problem, right? But then you need support in those CNIs. We had asked Salim and they said no. But, like that's something. Sorry, what's up, Costin?
No, okay. We tried. It's fine. I mean, if they don't want to make changes, what I put in the comment that us being a primary CNI is more and more appealing, because then it will force the issue. We are effectively. I mean, we don't require pretty much anything in Cilium or anything, because we provide the security, we provide pretty much everything. We need IP allocation, which is nice for multi-network, multi-cluster.
Okay, circling back as we were halfway through the meeting, it doesn't sound like there are any immediate long-term things we can do to sort of solve this mesh robustly. So how do we, assuming everybody agrees with that, what are our short-term things? So to reset the stage, Jackie has the own CNI feature that is a mitigation for this that's shipping in 1.27, but it's not backported. What are our next steps? We can look into doing a init container for 128. We're just exploring these options as other options as a priority in 128. Where do we go from here?
Well, I think the ideal situation, assuming we can't have a strong guarantee, right, is to put some time into some form of automated mitigation. Right, clearly. Right. Security issues are both a time and another access problem, and if we can at least mitigate the time, then we have made meaningful inroads on the actual security problem. But I think we should communicate it in release notes.
This is like some sort of continual reconciliation you're talking about, Louis?
Right, like, so we talked, like, we were looking at heuristics to see, could we detect that this problem state had occurred? Could we, what could we do to mitigate it, right? And so I put some notes in the doc. If we can get to a more reliable problem state detection, rather than, and an automated mitigation of it, right? That's probably the best we can do. We can also have, okay, if we can't mitigate it manually, or sorry, automatically, but we can detect it, then we can at least produce a very clear error message to the user saying, there's a problem here. Right, and here's what you need to go do. Here's the Istio FAQ, right? Go do these things, right? And if they get, what will probably happen is they'll get ticked off enough that there'll be a bunch of pressure on us to have a better version of the automated mitigation, right? So, like, I think we should just preempt that, frankly.
What piece of that are you proposing for 127, Louis? I want to just to be clear on.
I don't know, because I don't, right? As John said, we don't know exactly what the signals are and what permissions we might need. Like, could we taint the node, right? Like, we force the jobs back off the node while it's in that state.
What kind of guarantees do we have scheduling wise coming back up? So
yeah, I don't know, right? So
priority classes, we've got, yeah.
There's a whole bunch of crap, right? And the other problem is, like, if we taint the node and it doesn't untaint, right? Or we don't reliably untaint because maybe the CNI doesn't come up or run, are we eventually draining capacity out of the cluster, right? And then you're like, completely toasted you, right?
Yeah.
So, like, there's a bunch of things to think through there and to test on these platforms, right? Like, obviously there's quirks on Bottle Rocket because of the container image and how the file system works there. But I don't see any other viable engineering strategy other than that there's some magic bullet solution that we haven't found yet, right? Which sounds unlikely. Right, we've talked to other CNIs, like, we can go research what they've done. We've already talked to Cilium about it. They didn't seem super keen on providing a more concrete hook for the limited case that we cared about. The clouds are unlikely to change in a quarter-like time plane aligned around our release boundary, so, right?
But, I'm wondering if the cost of all those mitigation is lower or higher than doing what JK is doing, for example, which is pretty much fixing the problem by having it integrated natively. So if Cilium cannot apply our changes or make it, maybe we can just fork Cilium and put it in and have, basically, if we ship a solution that has a single CNI, the real CNI, do everything, we have no problems. There is no need for mitigation because they are already integrated.
Adoption problem, though. we have a big adoption problem because now you have to tell people you can't use Cilium with Istio.
Well, you can use Cilium with Istio. Istio Cilium fork, which includes Cilium. You install it with Istio. I know it's not viable, but it's the best solution. I mean, having a CNI that is doing the right thing, like JKE and vendors can also play a role because it's not. I mean, most users, a lot of users use vendors, and if all vendors have this solution implemented, it will be a very good argument for using. Hey, it's the same thing with Cilium, except that it's not. It doesn't have this problem. And
yeah, I mean, I'm just guessing the experience has been because like we found issues like, let's say AWS VPC CNI, right? There's an issue with the security group handling stuff for loopback, right? The special address classes, for which a bug was filed, right? It hasn't been fixed yet. So my expectation of timeline out of the cloud vendors, right, is measured in years.
And
right, so either way, we're forced into doing something, I think.
And sidecars are a solution for. I mean, if you do not use a CNI that is good, use sidecars. We have injection; it works very well. A lot of users are reasonably okay with that. We have
I think
very good
a lot
solutions.
of users, like if we had a good mitigation strategy that had a reasonably predictable heuristic, I think most users would choose that over injection.
Over injection and init containers that has worked so well for so long. And I'm not saying that.
No. So I'm just saying that because there's a class of user that would prefer that.
Yeah.
If you were very, very strict, yeah, we can give you the option to do a init container injection or something.
Yeah, the more we talk about it, I think the more I like the init container approach. It's very simple and it's only one time. Assuming I don't need to restart my pods after that one time when I enroll into ambient, okay? So as I'm moving from multiple version of Istio 127 to 128, as long as I pick it up, I don't need to restart. It's actually not too bad, I think. It's so much better than sidecar, right? Because it's not like intercept your traffic through the sidecar. It's still using ztunnel and waypoint. The magic is only that in that init container, which dies as my other application container gets running. So I think it's actually simple for everybody to understand.
I slightly disagree with you, Lynn. I mean, I don't think sidecars is inherently evil or wrong. I mean, if having ztunnel as a sidecar, it's perfectly fine, and we don't mess at all with CNI. It's not really different in any shape. I mean, it's
the upgrade restart requirement, Carsten.
Yeah, it's the restart requirement, and also the way it's
not
a real
fully
transparent. Well, it's not fully transparent to your app. We still have surprises when you inject the sidecar. But if I understood right now, the init container is all we need. We don't need a sidecar to solve this problem, right? We only need the init container to check out the IP table rules. Why would I bring in a sidecar? Because people are scared of sidecars. So
I think a lot of people use sidecars. I mean, they're more with the sidecar problem fixed now. I think they are coming back, and we are seeing, for example, on Cloud Run and a lot of other places, you are seeing sidecars coming back for open telemetry and a lot of other things. Where I mean, the sidecars are a valuable pattern. It's not something that is.
I'm not saying they're not
avoid, but
right. It's just what you're willing to tolerate, and there's obviously a very wide spectrum in the industry of upgrade cycles that people are willing to tolerate with sidecars, and they have their own inherent problems, as we well know. So does everybody agree that an init container solution of some kind is at least a reasonable thing?
Yes. Yeah. That's what we discussed last time, I think. So I'm still on board with the init container.
Okay. How do we tell people when and when not to use it? Do we tell them to always use it? Sometimes use it if they observe this problem? Or
is there a reason not to use it? I guess when they care, if they care about the problem, which most of users should care, then they should always use it. Do we need to tell them when to use or not use it? Because that's a complexity.
The downsides of the approach is the performance and visible complexity to the user.
Right.
Now, whether that's worth being opt-in or opt-out, I don't know. But
right, so if you choose. Sorry, go ahead, Mitch.
Well, I don't know if I've been working to eliminate the mutating webhook config from ambient deployments. And so, like, I'm not opposed to doing this at all. I think for some users, it will be the right choice, but I definitely think it will not be the preferred choice for all users. The MWC represents a significant security concern to a lot of customers. There are a lot of Kubernetes security scanners that will auto flag that, and that was a blocker to enterprise adopters for the sidecar pattern.
Yeah, it makes sense. Like, I think at the very least, we need the ability to turn it on and off, whether how we default, whatever. Like, I would think in the very short term, 1.27 is coming out very soon. We don't have an init container. It's probably good to turn it off by default at minimum in 1.27. But I don't know. It's tricky. Jackie?
Yeah, I mean, that's why I went back and forth, because I'm like, I don't know if this is something, I don't know how many users are going to pick it up for 127. I don't know how many people would want to immediately. So I guess I would definitely vote easily turn on or off. But that's why I was also pursuing, like, how else could we clean this up to make it even a little bit better for when they don't use an init container. So that's what I was looking at for some other like status checks, or like kind of what you were suggesting, Louis, in the notes. But yeah, I can definitely go back to a init container, but I was also looking to clean it up as best as we could for folks who do not choose to use init containers.
Yeah, if we keep this on and off as an option, we have to look into the other option too. When they don't have the init container, how do they know they run into this situation? How do they mediate? How can we minimize the window and recovery?
And if we do an init container, we probably don't need owned CNI. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to support like two different options for fixing this when the owned doesn't perfectly fix everything. But if folks like that idea, we could keep it around. But again, it's just another thing to maintain.
Sorry, the owned? Sorry.
Yeah, like I'm creating an Istio owned CNI config, basically of a higher priority than the primary CNI config, and it copies the primary CNI contents and then adds its own, adds the Istio CNI plugin to that list. So that was one approach that we took.
Okay, so that's a viable approach for people who are sensitive to the security issue.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's a simplified stepping stone. It's not fully init containers. It's somewhere kind of in between. Doesn't fix everything, but it fixes a lot. But init containers is more encompassing.
But so the Istio owned one likely just presents issues for CNI upgrade?
For scaling, I believe, is where we saw the gap. Right, Keith? I think that was the gap. If you add nodes, timing could potentially be an issue. We need to ask users to specifically have certain taints. Is that correct? You muted, Keith.
Thanks. So if you combine CNI with the taint controller, I think you're fine. But if you don't have the taint controller, then you still have the race condition with own CNI. To Louis' question for CNI upgrade, I don't think you have an issue on upgrade because the CNI config just references the binary name. And so it doesn't matter what version it is. So as long as, and plus also our binary upgrade, our CNI upgrade is singleton. So once you upgrade to the new CNI, you're still the priority.
So let's say, like, just as an example, I'm using AWS VPC CNI. Do they not have special handling for the CNI conf file, right? So that when they run their upgrade, like, it gets overwritten because they assume it's just something that they produced, right? And they're expecting all other CNIs to be layered afterwards.
We can have a watch. I need to go back and double check this, but on any changes to the basically we're looking at, if we use the Istio owned CNI config, we have the highest priority, and then we consider whatever the next highest was the original CNI config file. What we can do and what we have, I believe, is we can watch the existing CNI config file that was the primary, watch that for any updates, and then copy that back over to our Istio CNI. Basically, just rewrite, re-inject on any update.
Right, but that's
I think we
assuming
do
they just
watch
don't.
it. Though,
Yeah, I think
right?
I think so.
Yeah, the problem, Louis, is that so we have the file. Here's what we had thought when we had originally designed this. We write the file there, and it's all good because even if the CNI goes down, it's fine because the file's there, and things won't start because you need the daemon set and the file to work. But the file's there. The problem is all these other CNIs are when they start, they're just like, this file, I'm going to overwrite it entirely, remove Istio config from it, it's gone. They have no special consideration, and so they end up actually being the ones that break us. There are some other setups like the bottle rocket thing where it's the OS is wiping it. That's a different story, but and every CNI does this. Calico, CNI, or Cilium, KindNet, AWS, they all just write their file there. So.
And how do they know that they own the primary CNI?
Because they are the primary CNI. So they probably have some config. Like Cilium can do both. Not most of them can't do both, but Cilium can do both modes. It's just some setting in Cilium, whether it's a primary.
Right, in the overlay mode. Right?
Yeah, I forget what it's called, but.
And the same is true in VPC CNI. So if they're installed, they're assuming they're primary, they're just going to write the config file how they see fit.
Right. It's basically the primary CNIs. Very much, the primary CNIs aren't written necessarily to be like to contend or to play nicely.
Right. Yeah. No. Yeah. But their job is to assume they and only they need to work.
Exactly.
Yep.
So, right. So that just seems brittle, right? Like any approach where we try and take over the primary from the primary.
There is a limiting factor. There's a limiting principle in the way that containerd used to be kubelet, but the way that containerd reads the CNI priority. So CNIs know not to break other config because even though they assume they're the primary, I don't think that it's spec compliant to assume that you are the highest priority. So if the CNI config file, if you're Cilium, I think Cilium's with 0.5 or something like that. If something has like a higher alphanumeric precedence, like 0.2 as the prefix, then containerd will read that first for that network. And so that's the only limiting principle typically that CNIs are built to comply with. And so that's what the own CNI approach that Jackie wrote takes advantage of, or tries to take advantage of, is if we make ourselves a higher priority than the primary CNI, then it should then we won't get overwritten. Is the theory, at least?
Yeah, my understanding is we're not becoming the primary CNI. We just wrote a higher priority config file and we copied their config, but it's not we're becoming the primary CNI.
But doesn't that mean we do effectively become the primary CNI?
I mean, but like we're not first in the chain. I guess it depends on how you look at it, but we're not first.
Oh, fair. So that's fair. So the config that we write is the config that gets executed on, but Istio CNI is not the primary. That makes sense. That's a fair distinction.
Okay, so just I can read back the semantics. If we write a higher priority CNI file, containerd says that priority must be respected, even though we're not the first CNI called in the chaining.
Yes.
So how does containerd implement the semantic key? Right, because it's responsibility to call the thing, right?
So I'll modify your statement slightly. Containerd doesn't, at the point that it's deciding what file to execute, it doesn't know. Containerd doesn't care who wrote the file. That's not part of the contract. It doesn't care which CNI wrote the file. It just cares that a file exists on disk with a certain priority. And so it looks at all the files sitting in .conf and the directory that's passed to it, and the file that has the highest priority based on file name is the one that executes, regardless of who wrote it. And so what the own-CNI config does is it just that Jackie wrote is it allows the user to say, hey, take the primary CNI's config, merge it with Istio's, and write it to this file name. And so the user can control the priority of the conf file that gets written to disk, which means that on restart, the way it sort of addresses this issue, it means that on restart, the node, the containerd will call the CNI file that Istio CNI wrote that knows about Istio CNI.
Do you worry about like another CNI wanting their own CNI to be first and then just like flip-flopping back and forth? Because now you have two people modifying the high priority CNI.
Yeah, that's totally a possibility. The idea is that because the user, like the sysadmin, the cluster admin can set what the priority is, presumably they can also change what their primary CNI's priority is as well. Like Salim, I believe, allows you to overwrite it. It means the cluster admin, a human, gets to decide what that priority is the idea, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong there, Jackie.
Yeah, that's correct. But I mean, this condition that Stephen called out, and I think you looked into this, Stephen, as well, is if there was a CNI that required that it's the config file that it wrote be the highest priority, and then they basically fight for that highest priority is the scenario that Stephen described, but we didn't find that to be the case for most of the CNIs, I think.
Okay, so there's always these kind of these race conditions that, hey, I should be first. No, I'm first. Okay, but we didn't actually observe that. I guess it would be tricky for the CNIs to do that because it would limit their adoptability anyway, right? Like let's say there's a lower level CNI and its only job is to like do very low level network provisioning step. They're not really the CNI, right? But they're kind of a necessary init step. The CNIs would kind of lock themselves out of running in those environments. Multus might be a good example of that. So it would actually be surprising to me that the CNIs deliberately raced for priority based on that assumption. So I'm not totally surprised we're not seeing that effect.
Oh, Stephen, we only read one file from the list of CNI configs files. We only read the first file. We don't read every file in that folder, just to clarify.
Sorry, folks, I'm going to have to move to my phone, so if someone else could keep taking notes.
But I guess going back to what the question I think we were originally trying to answer is, do we need to keep both solutions around? I think that was the motivation for this. I'm totally fine if we get in a container. I'm not tied to the Istio and CNI config, having written it. But it is an in-between. I don't know if it's just another thing that we want to have to maintain, but I don't mind either way. But if it's something that we think users would prefer, I mean, we don't really know. I mean, I know some people have been testing it out already just from some Slack conversations. And I know that based on the GitHub issue that I know one guy is particularly against this, against having just an Istio and CNI config, and he wants an init container. So I think there might be folks going both ways, but again, not don't feel super strongly either way.
Yeah, so I'm curious on your feedback you heard, Jackie, so far, because I do think the init container approach is pretty transparent to different CNI provider, different cloud provider, which does have an advantage. the approach you mentioned about the priority, high priority CNI, I'm very curious on the feedback you heard from user and how much testing do we as a team can test, because I know when Ben and Yuval did the initial work for CNI, Istio CNI, we had to spend a lot of energy to test the different CNI provider, different cloud. So I don't know if this approach would be transparent. My gut feeling is it's not very transparent, which means we have to do a big round of testing. So I don't know if that's the burden the project is willing to entertain too.
That's fair. I mean, I would say with cloud providers, they have their, I would say, a little bit more flexibility in resolving this themselves with how they handle their like just timing labels taints their own primary CNI. I think that, you know, they could maybe solve this more themselves if they truly wanted a more personalized solution. That would be my argument kind of against the cloud provider benefit of not doing the Istio and CNI config. Go ahead, Keith.
Yeah, in my mind, it's sort of two personas. One is sort of somebody who is trying to provide something, provide Istio like as a service or as a platform in a SaaS fashion where you don't control the nodes, but you want to have strong guarantees on that your multi-tenant users can't run into this. I think that's sort of where Aaron is. I think there's another persona where you're just running your fleet. Maybe you're running CAPI clusters or COPS clusters on your cloud provider, and you're not using managed Istio. You're just sort of building this yourself, and you've brought your own Cilium or brought your own Calico or whatever else, and you've got control over these sorts of things. And I think that's where an Istio CNI approach would be sufficient for that second persona, because you do have that control. Does that sound right to you, Jackie, or to others? That's sort of the distinction that I've seen just with the approaches.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly see a decent number of people who, like in the EKS case, bringing their own Cilium to EKS.
Right.
That's not uncommon. I think there's a reasonable class of people who also say, look, if you have some form of reasonably efficient mitigation, right, where I can tolerate my application being up, but not properly secured for small numbers of seconds, maybe small numbers of tens of seconds, I can live with that in production. Right, on the assumption that you have a roadmap to fix this, right? Or that the community has a roadmap to fix this.
True. I mean, do we have a sense of how angry people would be with the addition of an init container, given that's been something that we've kind of sold as a benefit of ambient, like to not have to, restart your pods to join the mesh? Like, do you have a sense of how frustrating that would be for folks?
It's not a requirement, right? So I guess.
True. But they
Like
might feel like, ambient's insecure unless I have init containers. But init containers change my flow.
Init containers aren't sidecars, though, which is, I think,
an
important distinction. And I think that's something we can massage in communications, which I'm realizing we're at the top of the hour or out of time, but we didn't discuss comms on this. Do we have a decision as far as how to proceed for 127 that's releasing in about a week? Do we know how to communicate, how you want to communicate it? Sounds like TOC needs to discuss more asynchronously.
Yeah, I think so.
Is what I guess the sense that I get. Okay, so I'll start a thread in our channel, and we can discuss. Go ahead, Louis.
Yeah, my inclination right? The de minimis solution is a mitigation, right? Like everything else is a technical improvement on that. But that seems like the least. The user need to know how to find out that this is happening. Now if we don't have that solution now, we need to give them a way to get that solution as quickly as possible. Even with the manual mitigation, right? Taint the node yourself manually, forcibly restart the CNI, whatever it is, they need to be able to know that it's happening.
Do we ship 127 without that?
We could ship without it, but we can say that we're aware of this issue. Here is what our plan is. I think we need to have the plan.
Okay. So, okay, I'm glad Daniel's here from the release management perspective. So it sounds like our communication, our message to release managers is the blocker is comms on this issue, mitigation strategies, what our plan is, etc.
And that probably means that there's a little bit of a blocker on TOC agreeing about what the plan is. We need to state it clearly.
Yes. Okay, we will follow up asynchronously. It might be, because this is a release blocker, I think it might be necessary to have another synchronous discussion on this, potentially. So we'll find a good time for TOC and get this done as soon as we can, so we don't unnecessarily block the release.
Yeah. Let's move it to the Slack channel. Let's just flesh out some of the options, paths of investigation for folks. Maybe I've seen that before.
All right, sounds good.
All right.
Bye, folks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.